2023 has been a relatively flat market for staffing in software as a service, but one subset of procurement and supply chain tech has been bucking the trend, and that's environmental social governance. So the market is large and growing rapidly. I'll give you a couple of figures on that. So it's growing at roughly 12% per annum. And as it stands, the total addressable market in Europe and the US is valued at around $6 billion US. So the question is why? Well, really, there's three answers to that. Firstly, stakeholders are putting more pressure on businesses to disclose their ESG credentials. So customers, investors are more and more interested in essentially what businesses are doing in terms of environmental social governance. There's some operational benefit. So firms are seeing fewer accidents, lower insurance premiums, for example. But undoubtedly, the biggest driver here is legislation. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So in January 2023, the German Supply Chain Act came into force, which mandated every German business that employed more than 3,000 people to disclose on a number of ESG topics. That dial is actually getting turned up in January of next year. So any business in Germany that employs more than 1,000 people will be subject to the same obligations. Also next year, the CSRD is coming into force. Now, this is a European Union law and will cover around about 50,000 firms across the European Union. So you're going to see an awful lot of growth here. This is also being shadowed by similar legislation in both the UK and the US. So as you can see, there's some very, very strong regulatory tailwinds here. So how is this demand being serviced by tech businesses? There are essentially three kinds of vendor. There are businesses that have moved into the sector from an adjacent one. So a good example here would be businesses perhaps working in the environment, health, safety and quality sector and have often bought a business that was already in ESG to help their credentials. So I'm going to give you an example here of the US-based Sphera buying the German firm Risk Methods. There are traditional ERP vendors such as SAP and Oracle who've added specialist ESG modules to their offering. And undoubtedly, the biggest subset is specialist ESG vendors, of which there are a couple of hundred worldwide. These businesses are relatively new, still in startup or scale-up mode, and usually have annual revenues of less than $10 million. So, in terms of staffing, let's have a look at the hiring trends. What kind of background do these businesses recruit from? They certainly like people from procurement and supply chain tech, also from compliance and risk. That's because they are essentially familiar with the kind of personas that an ESG business would want to sell to or deal with. What I'm also seeing is an interesting pattern in terms of salaries and experience level, because often ESG businesses will take on account execs, for example, with a little bit less experience than perhaps a full P2P platform. And that's reflected in their salaries. So just to give you an idea, ESG businesses in Europe might be paying somewhere between 60 and 90,000 euros as a basic, whereas for a full P2P platform, you're probably looking more like 80 to 110. Also of note is that a number of people I've spoken to about ESG businesses really have this stronger sense of purpose by going to work for a firm of this nature. They feel like they're contributing to a greater good over and above their own pay packet. So what are we expecting for 2024? Well, certainly more growth, but I think also there's a possibility of some consolidation. Maybe some bigger players will look to add ESG credentials to their businesses, or maybe some firms will simply join forces. Either way, it's going to be interesting to see. Hope you found this helpful. Thanks for watching.